Great, thank you. Good evening. We'll call the meeting of the Hawarden, Iowa City Council to order on Wednesday, February 14th, 2018 at 5:31 p.m. Present are quite a number of us. Two council members not with us tonight. Travis is ill. I think Tim has gone on vacation. Mike DeBrien's still gone on vacation. Just so new council members know, when we're down to three folks, if we have, as we will tonight, ordinances, we must have the majority of 5, so any ordinance readings and those types of things to pass tonight need to be 3-0. So otherwise they will not pass in that instance. So just saying, not putting any pressure on you, just saying, okay?
No pressure.
No pressure. Thanks for being here, obviously. Again, as usual, our first standard agenda item is the approval of the January 24th, 2018 City Council meeting minutes. You've had those in your packet. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Moved by John. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Jen. Questions or clarifications? All in favor then of the January 24th City Council meeting minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That passes 3-0. Number 1B is the approval of our claims for payment this evening, and we'll start with Rob for questions.
No questions.
Jen, any questions?
No questions.
John?
So moved.
Been a motion by John. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Seconded by Rob. All in favor then of the claims for payment for February 14th, say aye.
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 Those opposed? Again, that passes 3-0. Agenda item number 1C is open business from the community. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the mayor's report. The city council meeting this evening is Gary Tucker's last meeting as the city administrator for our community of Hawarden. I want to thank him for a job well done. He's helped the city to complete a number of quality projects and has also put the city into a wonderful fiscal setting. To work with Gary has been a joy, and I appreciate the friendship that we have developed. Gary has been very fair, hardworking, and compassionate about making our community better. Per his request, there will not be an open house for his retirement. He's told us he wouldn't show up if there was. So I would encourage anyone and everyone to call or to write Gary to give him your thanks and best wishes upon his retirement. The West Sioux wrestling team continues to be successful as they wrestled today at the state team duels, wrestling right now for 5th place, and will bring 5 individuals to state wrestling starting on Thursday. We congratulate them on their hard work, dedication, and success, and wish them all well. Likewise, with the West Sioux girls basketball, they continue down the tournament trail on Friday. We wish them success there. The Hawarden Library has many activities for all ages. Please explore what the library has to offer for you and your family. The community dinner this month is Tuesday, February 20th, again from 5 to 7 p.m. And lastly, there are many opportunities in our community to volunteer and help others. Please think about volunteering your time and your talents with the Big Sioux Historical Society, the Hawarden Hospital Thrift Store, the food pantry at the American Lutheran Church, the grandparent program, or at your church. By volunteering, you make our community that much better. Roy T. Bennett said this about acts of kindness. A random act of kindness, no matter how small, can make a tremendous impact on someone else's life. So please take the time to be kind to others. We'll move on, please, to any council comments.
Just additional thanks to Gary for all of his hard work over the many years of service. Best wishes.
Thank you.
We'll move on then to staff reports, and we'll start with Mr. Pickner. Anything from your perspective?
I thank Gary also. It's been a pleasure to work with him, and hate to see him go, but a lot of other people, I guess, are going to be moving on too, so we're going to have new faces.
New faces.
Probably not me.
We'll have some new faces and an old one to my right.
Yeah, that's right.
That's okay. Thank you. Corey?
Haven't had a lot of time to work with Gary, but the time I have had has been nothing but pleasant, and I appreciate the opportunities you've given me and my family and bringing us on board. And thank you.
Pam?
I, too, would like to thank Gary for everything he's done for the city, and especially for the guidance and leadership you've shown to me. Thanks.
Tom Kane?
Yeah, we've had a pretty good time the last 9 years, so it's been fun here at the city. I have a few things to bring up. Hazardous Household Cleanup Day is April 6th, and citywide cleanup is May 4th through the 6th. It's always something we kind of look forward to, and it's be warmer weather, I hope. We did have a meeting today in Lamar's with NIPCO and Missouri River Energy Services, our supplemental power supplier. And we were planning on bringing in our new transmission line to town down the north side of Highway 10. And it goes approximately 4 miles east of town. And we can use our old line as a backup for a few years until we find another way to get a second feed to town. That's kind of the hope. The reality is we have only had a single feed to town since the 1950s when our existing line was built. So, and the one right now, it was in a good spot when they built it. It was down the railroad tracks. It had be on the south side of the golf course, the old tracks that went to Ireton, I believe. And at that time, it was a good spot, and it's out in the middle of fields right now. So if we have problems and it's muddy, it's impossible to get to almost at certain times of the year anyway. So, and we will have another outage in April and May. Our existing line, they put in a bypass for the switch so they could put in a new remote switch, the one that feeds us now, and we will have to shut down for a few hours again in April or May when it warms up. So hopefully, if we get this new line built, we can avoid those kind of outages. At least have another way to get our power to town while they're working on it. And that's all I have.
What's the kind of the timeline on that new line? Is there kind of a...
It's the engineering is in the budget right now, and we're hoping the following year from this coming summer we can get that line put in. So.
Okay. And then I know you talked about at our last meeting kind of how the obviously with the cold weather how our utility bills spiked tremendously, and still have some questions out there about exactly how we purchase our gas and how that spike happened so greatly. Could you kind of give us an update again on that, just to refresh us all, please?
When they buy our forward gas, it's for the winter months, November through March, and that's considered the heating months. And we buy our forward winter gas is 20%. And there is some Carlton gas is the name of it. It comes in from Canada, and we're locked into that because of we're on Northern Natural's line. That's another 20%. We have storage gas, which is about 15% of our gas, and we get front of the month gas, which is another 15%. So we end up with approximately 70%, and it can, depending on the volumes, if we're so temperature sensitive, it can go up as far as 85%. I gave you a handout, and it shows you like in December, and our average amount of gas we burn is 16,650 MCF that month, and that goes back 20 years. We track it as well as our supplier, and he updates it yearly. We locked in 13,000 MCF, which is about 78% of our average, but we burned 19,500. And some of those days we didn't use any of the daily gas. It's zero, and there's days that we use 650. So we are so temperature sensitive, we don't have a steady load necessarily. And those last 3 days of December, they were critical days where they had to start up extra compressors and bring in gas that they don't normally get. And I think they overcharged us for it, but I think they overcharge everybody for it that is in this area. There's not a lot of we can do about it. January, it gives you the same rundown. We average 18,000, locked in 15,500. It's about 86% of our average, and we burned 20,800. And it was, Northern Natural sent out a bulletin, the polar vortex of 2014 was one of the coldest winters on record, and we were 8 degrees colder on average through this last one we had. So the piece on the bottom, I don't have 2017. I will update that for you next month. Tracy was gone today. But that shows you what 100 CCF of gas cost a customer. And that's a winter average. So if you go back as far as 2000, really 5 through 8, they were up there pretty high for the year average. And we averaged in December 751. So it's happened before. It will happen again too. So.
And you also had told me at one time, we don't want to purchase 100% because it might not be used and still get paid. I mean,
Right,
still have
to get those averages, you also have a low average. So if you over purchase and you don't meet what you purchase, you pay to get it back in the pipe, so to speak. They penalize you for over purchasing on the pipeline. Then if you over purchase, it takes up space that somebody else could use, and they don't want you doing that.
So it's obviously kind of one of those anomalies that in the past 20 years, it's like once or twice, and
It generally works pretty good, so.
yeah. Okay. Thanks for that. Anything from Gary?
I could say a lot, but just thanks for the opportunity to serve the community, and it's been a great 9 years. So look forward to retirement and what's to come, I guess. So.
So you're going to ride out on the Harley next week if it's warm enough?
Maybe not. Well, you never know. You never know. Probably not next week. I still have to work next week yet, but maybe the following week. They'll get warm weather.
All right.
So.
Thanks. Move on to other agenda items, and hospital update, please, with Jason. A little more information on the audit, please.
Thank you. Last meeting, we had just a brief overview of where we ended up last year. Our audit goes through June and starts a new one in July, so we're almost done we're getting close to the end of the year again, but I wanted to share some of the financial indicators for the organization as we had them last year. Usually our audit is October, November. I mean, we have an auditor come in called Simon Johnson. He goes through all the books and makes sure we're doing everything appropriately. And so I just wanted to go. He usually every year provides us just a brief overview of some indicators, and so I'd like to just go over those with you briefly. So the first slide there is you see the total margin, and just to give you kind of a landscape. On the left-handed column there, you have some cylinder bar graphs or whatever you want to call them, and the blue one is 2013, and it goes 14, 15, 16, and 17, and that 13.3 is actually wrong. It's supposed to be 6.5 on the second graph there. So those are our years as we progress in our organization. And then the next to the right of that is South Dakota average and also the Iowa average, Nebraska, and then he usually tries to put in two organizations that are like-minded or like size for just to kind of give us a comparison of how we're sitting in comparison to other organizations. So the first peer is another healthcare facility in in Iowa, similar size, similar volumes, those types of things. The next one, the peer number 2, is an organization that is in Nebraska. And they don't give us out who it is, so I really can't pinpoint that this is one organization, but it's some organization that's of similar size and a similar volume. So total margin is there. You can see that, and some of the biggest things that I want to just mention is in 2016, we were right in the throes of the building project, and we've seen our volume drastically decrease. I've heard in the community, you know, the hospitals closed, the hospitals, they're tearing down the old hospital, and we've seen our volumes drastically decrease, and we were really kind of concerned about that. And obviously, total margin is total revenue minus total expenses, and then divided by the total revenue, so it kind of gives you a snapshot there. And as depreciation starts to enter into the picture, you'll start to see your total margin go down. And as you can see, back on that last slide, the peer number 1 just got done building an organization, and so you can see the depreciation starting to sit in there, and you can see that the negative bottom line that came along with that, and it'll kind of explain throughout the graphs how that transpires. But the next one is basically just which one you got there? Cash flow margin. And so obviously this is how we turn our business into cash. And as you can see, over the course of several years, we've been doing well. Obviously, in 2016, you can see a dip, and that's ultimately volume driven. And you can see South Dakota and Iowa, and Nebraska, and then again Pier 1 and Pier number 2. And then we go on to long-term debt, and obviously organizations, when they build something, they have to acquire debt to do that, unless they're cash flush and they have revenue coming out of their back pockets. But as you can see, in 2013, our debt long-term debt to capitalization was low because we were not doing much. We were making small improvements, but we weren't making huge improvements. And as you can see, as the years progress, we started to see more debt and more long-term debt to capitalization. And as you can see in Pier number 1, they just got done building a brand new organization, and so you can see that we're starting to crouch up into that area also. Obviously, the trend is down, but it's really a reinvestment into your community, and so whenever you put money back into your organization, you're going to have an increase in that margin. Days of revenue accounts receivable, obviously that's when we have a person come in and they're discharged and we start to bill. This is the days that it takes to get cash in the door. You can see in 2013 we were 79. We had a huge increase of 107 days. We did some administrative controls, brought that down to 49.7, and it's been slowly migrating upward. Probably in 2017, the biggest factor is processing claims through Medicaid and the MCOs. That's been kind of a challenge through the Medicaid payer source as they've gone to more of a commercial-based payer system. So. And then another thing is the cash on hand. The next slide, please. You can see what cash on hand is the number you see is how many days we can go without collecting a dollar and still have operation and still be able to pay our bills and be in operation. And as you can see, we're at 111 in 2013, and that cash days and cash on hand continue to escalate. The interesting thing about the depreciation as it enters into the Medicare cost report, our bottom line will look red, but the days of cash will go up. And as you can see in Pier number 1, they just got done building a facility, and their days of cash on hand is over a year. And so as we start to see next year, we'll see probably a negative bottom line, but just watch the days of cash on hand, and that should progressively increase. And the Pier number 2, you can see that they have literally 48 days of cash on hand. So they have a month and a half of cash on hand, but they don't have any assets to build. And we'll show you in just a few minutes that the average age of plant is extremely old. And the next slide is outpatient revenue to total revenue. So ultimately, where do we get most of our revenue for the hospital? And majority of it comes out of outpatient business. About 80% of our revenue comes from outpatient surgery, outpatient nursing, and the rest of it comes from inpatient type of activity. So it's just interesting to kind of see where we get most of our revenue from for the hospital. Medicare outpatient cost to charge ratio. This is an interesting kind of situation. We have costs that go into our Medicare cost report, and they develop a cost to charge ratio for inpatient, for outpatient. This one happens to be the outpatient cost to charge ratio. So if you could think about it this way, for every $100 we charge, in 2007 we got $52. And so as the depreciation starts to enter into the Medicare cost report, as you can see, our Pier 1 facility, that cost rolls in, the cost to charge ratio goes up. So as we charge $100, they're getting $68. So actually adding the new debt to the organization actually allows us to get more money from Medicare, which is part of the analysis of why we built it the way we did. Because running it through the Medicare cost report, the government, unfortunately, you and I all pay for about 50% of that. So, and then we have Medicare acute days percentage, and it's just basically it's the amount of revenue we get from Medicare acute days. And so these are not swing beds, and swing beds are kind of a long-term care solution or outpatient in a bed. And so these are patients that are strictly Medicare in a bed in an acute care setting. And so you can see as we look at our population, you can see that a high percentage of our population that we put in beds for acute care are Medicare. 88% of those individuals are Medicare. And you look at our population base, it is an aging population, and so that makes sense. Obviously, our goal is to try to recapture some of our market share so we get a younger population that comes into our organization, so we can start to squish that down a little bit, because the more we can make on the opposite side of Medicare is where really the revenue is. So just gives you a picture of where our population's coming from. And then we go into the average daily census, and this is just acute care. We were just talking about acute care. So we run about 1 to 0.6 of a patient in a bed a day. Now that doesn't mean that we don't have patients in a bed. It just means we have about a 0.6 of a patient in a bed a day that's in acute care. We have swing bed, we have observation bed, and we have a variety of other different financial classes in a bed, but this is just strictly an acute care patient in a bed. And so then if we go down to average daily census of swing bed, which is the other indicator that we look at is swing bed population. So these are patients that need long-term IV antibiotics, long-term therapy to get them back into their home, or a decision to transition them to a nursing home or assisted living and type of environment. And so you can see that our numbers fluctuate dramatically depending on the year and depending on what's going on in our community. So. And then we have, of course, I think the last slide is the average age of the plant. And you can see that our organization in 2013 was 13 years. And as we started to add new CT and a variety of other equipment, it started to drive that age of plant down. And as in 2017, we were able to drive that down a little bit further, just because part of the year we started to take on some of the depreciation, and because we moved into part of the organization, but not the entirety of the organization. And as you can see in South Dakota, they're 11.4, and that one Pier facility, they just, again, rebuilt their facility, and their average age of plant is 5 years. And so obviously the trend is preferred down. You want to have a renewed plant and be able to provide services for long years. And you can see in Pier number 2, their average age of the plant is 20.6 years. So they have an old plant, they don't have any cash, and they have really no way of generating revenue, and so they're really in dire straits. So it kind of gives you an overall picture of where we have been since 2013 to current state. It gives you a look at South Dakota, Iowa, Nebraska, and the biggest things to come away with is we probably will see negative bottom lines as the depreciation hits. watch the cash, because cash is king, and that should escalate as we continue to operate in our organization. So, any questions?
Questions? Something I had an opportunity, just on a side note, to have lunch the other day at the hospital, looking for another place to go, and it was delightful.
Yep.
Sunshine and a great place to be, and a great variety on the menu, and
Yep.
just real nice.
One highlight that I will mention is that we were able to bring in a dermatologist, which is hard to find, and we have gotten great response from that. We were up to one time a month, and the volume was so busy that we're going to be doing 2 times a month, and they're booked. And so it's looking at those types of services, and we have somebody that's interested to come out that has a specialty at OBGYN, and so they'll be making a site visit in April 11th just to take a look and meet the medical staff. So obviously we got to continue to trying to bring in specialty services so people don't have to drive so far to get those services, and it gives us exposure with people walking through the door. So that's my goal for the next year, is to drive the business as hard as I can.
Good. Thanks to you and your staff, and the hospital board. They're doing a nice job.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And also, since everybody said thanks to Gary, I wish you the best, Gary, and it's been a pleasure over the last 5 years working with you and your leadership and helping us get this project up and off the ground. And Tom, also, you've been a great value to everything that we've been doing, and we appreciate your service also. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Excuse me. Agenda item number 4, this will be the first reading of an ordinance 700, amending the Code of Ordinances of the City of Hawarden for amending the cable TV rates. We had discussion last month. We'll kind of go back to Gary again, and also then for the new council members, and you'll know this, but with ordinances, there are 3 readings, so opportunity for public input at 3 different meetings. Sometimes city councils will waive readings of ordinances. It's been our policy in Hawarden. We generally have never waived readings of ordinances. We think it's important for opportunities for the public to give us input in all 3 readings. So I'll kind of pass it to Gary again for information on what the staff has put together for us tonight.
For the most part, just to keep it as simple as I can, with the exception of local service, I guess maybe go back a step, and we have, John had asked for this information as well, but we have 46 local customers, 589 basic, and 61 digital cable customers currently. Local service is really just your very basic KCAU, KTIV types of channels only. And the cost of service for those, we're only recommending a $2 increase in that particular area. Everything else, with the exception of the digital base pack, we recommended a $9.05 increase. Everything else, $10. So anything that's associated with cable television, the packages as well, that would include cable, we suggested a $10 increase in all those rates. And as we discussed at our last meeting, we're currently selling our cable programming at for $6 less than what it's costing us to deliver. And that's just the programming alone. That's not equipment, that's not manpower, that's not anything else. So that's the reason for the necessary needed increase. And again, staff, I kind of stepped out of the way a little bit and let Mike work through some of these numbers, and these are, I think, his suggestions, but I would concur that that's where we need to be at a minimum. So So I don't know if you have additional questions. I did include the previous ordinance and the current proposed ordinance for your review in the packet. And, you know, we at least need to be in a position where we're not losing money. And I do think that we're very competitive in the cable industry in our rates, even with the increase. We're much less than surrounding cable companies are. So.
Yeah, I kind of looked at what Premier was doing and my experience from what it is up to Lakes, where we have a place up there, and we are considerably less than what they are. So.
We've been behind for a number of years. Correct, we've always been lagging the
Yes.
cost.
We constantly lag behind, and again, my suggestion is going to be to you and Mike as well, to maybe look at this in October of this next year rather than January, so that, because we already know what the increase is going to be for, part of the problem this year is every 3 years, the retransmission fees are contractually negotiated, and now we know what the next 2 years are going to be, so he can come back a little earlier probably, and so we don't lag maybe next year if there's an increase necessary, which I assume there will be of some nature, but at least I would advise maybe talking about them in October or November, so that when the increases go into effect in January, you're not lagging behind for 2 months, because it always takes 3 readings of the ordinance and a publication. So it's really about a 2-month process once you start the discussion, so.
Other thoughts or questions in regards to this reading? Hearing no questions, is there a motion for the first reading of ordinance 700 to amend the Code of Ordinances by amending the cable TV rates?
So moved.
Been a motion by John. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Jen. Hearing no other questions, we'll call for a roll call vote, please, for the first reading of ordinance 700.
Feldhacker,
Aye.
Bergsma,
Aye.
Clucky,
Aye.
On a 3-0 roll call vote, the first reading of ordinance 700 passes. Second reading again will be February 28th. Agenda item number 5, this would be the first reading of an ordinance 701, amending the Code of Ordinances of the City of Hawarden by eliminating the penalty of imprisonment for a violation of the city ordinance. I think we'll refer to
Better let,
our
Mr.
imprisonment
Pickner.
person, Mr. Pickner here.
Yes. Well, when you charge somebody with a crime that carries a possibility of imprisonment, they're entitled to an attorney. And they're entitled, if they're indigent, they're entitled to an attorney at state expense, so they appoint someone from the public defender's office. In most cases, when we're charging somebody, there's usually a more serious charge along with it, and our charge generally just gets pled out and thrown away. And what's happened is the legislature has told the public defender's office that if they're appointing an attorney where there's charges by a city that carry imprisonment, then they're to collect attorney fees from the city. They're to bill out their attorney fees to us. I don't know what that would look like, but I don't really think we need to see it. In most cases, we can charge people with, with a state charge that carries a similar penalty instead of charging them with our local ordinance. I can't remember a time that I've prosecuted anything where we imprisoned anybody. Sometimes it's good. There may be a few charges that they have to charge under an ordinance, and I think they can still charge them under that ordinance. That might serve as their basis to investigate, stop somebody, talk to them about something, and discover other evidence that leads to a higher charge. But for the time being, until we see a need for it, I just thought this is the easiest way to make sure we don't get a bunch of attorney bills. So, that's it. Questions?
Makes sense.
That's an attorney telling us. Don't want more attorney bills and. Just kidding.
Well, if it was mine, I'd feel different about it. but I'm not
That's in
doing,
that's
I'm
in the
not
budget.
doing criminal.
That's in the budget. We'll get to that.
Right.
Is there a motion for the first reading of ordinance 701, amending the Code of Ordinances by eliminating the penalty of imprisonment for violation of a city ordinance? Moved by John,
I'll second that.
seconded by Rob. Roll call vote, please, for the first reading of ordinance 701.
Clucky,
Aye.
Feldhacker,
Aye.
Bergsma,
Aye.
On a 3-0 roll call vote, then the first reading of ordinance 701 passes. Next agenda item would be review and discussion on a proposed ordinance dealing with social hosting in regards to those under years of 21. Corey?
Basically, what the goal, excuse me, of this ordinance is to mimic the Iowa legislature's law that they enacted in 2014 of social hosting. That law basically prevents people from providing a place for persons under the age of 21 to consume alcoholic beverages. The nice thing about that, there's no preemption with this law. That means the city of Hawarden can make it more strict. I think it's imperative that we add to that any substance that can intoxicate persons under the age of 21, i.e. Methamphetamine, marijuana, prescription drugs, and/or its precursors. I think looking at our statistics from last year, obviously drugs were the number one thing that we had to combat the most. And I think the more progressive stance that we take in this with our community, the better we're going to stop that and make it a deterrence for people to allow people to come into their homes or shops or dwellings and partake in these festivities. I think we need to just keep moving forward with it and let those types of people know that we don't stand for that stuff.
So you're saying that the legislature in 2014, it's enacted already on the state level,
Correct.
but only not for all the substances that you have just mentioned, is that correct?
Correct. When they first passed the law, it was actually only for persons under the age of 18 consuming alcohol. It has then since been brought back, and now they've changed it to anybody under the age of 21 that's consuming alcohol. They haven't gone into the substance abuse portion of it with other drugs outside of alcoholic beverages. I know that there are at least 30 other agencies within this area, or cities, municipalities, that have a code like this, and it's not meant to be a revenue-making ordinance. Obviously, it's meant as a deterrence more than anything, and showing the not only the community that we know what's going on and we want to stop it, but also it lets people know that there is a penalty if they do choose to make those choices and provide such dwellings.
Comment from a legal aspect?
Well, I guess I provided the ordinance. Corey had mentioned some interest in this. I think he had worked with it where he was before. I took an ordinance that another city was using and just modified it. So, I think it makes it a little easier for them to prosecute some things. And like Corey was referring to, basically, we still have a home rule, which, by the way, it's the 50-year anniversary of home rule.
That's right.
Yep. And that means that if we're not preempted, we are allowed to exercise our powers to make this a little stronger, which I think is what Corey would like to see. You're at the discussion phase now, but there's a draft ordinance, and I think law enforcement feels it would be useful to them. So,
Council, some comments for some direction?
So this is,
Go ahead.
so this is not changing the necessary legality of the act? I mean, that's still
It
under the
is,
same law?
from, according to the state law, there are certain elements to the crime. I know this has come up, we enacted the same policy in Crawford County when I worked there. We kept running into the issue of, out in the county, we'd have people providing, let's say, a machine shop for these kids to go there and partake in, you know, drinking activities. We had one person at the age of 17 that left one of those parties, drove away, rolled her vehicle, and passed away. The adult thought that they were doing the right thing by controlling the drinking and knowing that the party was going on, but you can't control 100% that type of atmosphere. At that time, there wasn't a lot that we could do with it, so we had enacted this, like I said, as a deterrence to let them know that there is something that can happen to them if this does happen. But with this, there are certain things. A person that has the facility, dwelling, structure, whatever it is that they occupy, we have to be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that they're knowingly and intentionally allowing this place to be used to partake in these activities. It's not just a hunch, it's nothing, you know, no mere suspicion. We have to be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And we have to be able to show that the kids that are there, you know, they are using and consuming intoxicants. And, you know, we don't want people to leave these types of places and, you know, put our citizens in jeopardy on the roadway. You know, let alone somebody that's only been driving 3 years, 4 years on the road, now put them in an intoxicated manner. Their reaction, you know, time and everything, it's just it's a public safety thing. And I think the more vigilant we are to prevent that, the better.
This, again, would not fall onto, if I owned a house and I'm renting it to Joe Blow, and Joe Blow's having the party, it doesn't come back to the owner of the house.
Correct.
It comes back to Joe Blow, correct?
Correct. It does not, because we wouldn't be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that that owner of the building that's renting it out was allowing that to take place.
Rob, you had some questions?
Oh, I just had a chance to visit with Corey a little bit. First time I seen it was this week, and I just wanted to clarify a few things and see where this was kind of coming from and that, but yeah. So I think we kind of cleared that up, but you know, since we don't have a full council today, you know, maybe with some other guys would like an opportunity for a little input too before we move forward with it.
Put it on the agenda for the 28th. Should have a full council at that time, barring any illnesses. Again? Okay.
You, just so I'm clear, you want it on for discussion at the next meeting, not as a first reading or anything like that, right?
Well, we have 3 here, so I can kind of poll you. We can certainly put it on as a first reading, and if it does not, you know, pass for some reason, I don't know, I'm not put these 3 on the spot, but give me your thoughts.
They'd be able to ask questions and clarify and go through the same process as that time?
Right, yeah.
But they would have the same ordinance to
Right, they'd
first
have,
read?
right. The only thought would be that would be the first reading, so. Mhm.
It's largely a matter of time, but, you know, what you don't want to do is read it and then change it on a second reading is the only thing.
Right. Was there going to be some changes to this prior to that point?
Well, if they
To
are, they
include
come from
drugs
council, right?
Right.
So,
Yep. I like the way he had written it, and I think it makes the most sense to be applicable to the city of Hawarden that way.
If we put it on for discussion, it'd just be a 2-week delay.
Yeah, whatever you want. Can,
Why don't we put it on for discussion? That'll give the other council members opportunity again to talk with Corey and see the background and get some more thought, and give these 3 some more opportunity for that time too. So we'll put it on as as we have tonight, review and discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Corey. Thank you, Jim. Agenda item number 3, last meeting we had a good presentation on the wastewater plant improvements and potential rate increases. It was kind of an overview from DGR, and Sam did a nice job, and we want to, if we can, maybe have some continuation and a thought process of maybe not necessarily at this point rate increases, but continued discussion on the wastewater plant improvements and see where we go, if we have discussion tonight, or if we need to, again, have a full council to get a little more direction from all 5 of you folks. But we'll ask the council members and/or staff to give us a little more feedback tonight with what was presented last week, or excuse me, 2 weeks ago. So, Tom, you want to give a little overview on how you felt with that presentation?
I thought Sam did a great job with it, and the plant is 50 years old, and it definitely needs some updates, and I commend Al for everything he's done down there. And it's just getting a little tired and getting, I don't know if it's in a critical stage yet, but it's probably going to be at some point. You know, if your blower system, that would probably be the worst thing if that would go down on you. There are no parts for this any longer, and they don't make this type of blower anymore. So that would be one of the main things to get going. And if you've noticed, if you have gone by there, the 2 clarifiers, which are the final process before it goes through the UV lights, have tarps on them. So in a winter like this, when we have, well, if it's 10 degrees or any colder, they start freezing up, and they have scrapers that run around on the top and bring back solids back into the plant. That starts to discontinue, and to get covers on those would just be a wonderful thing for the operators. The tanks themselves are in pretty good shape. They can be back plastered, and the engineers thought the plant was in really good shape considering its age because of the care it's had, but the motors and pumps are just like the blowers. They're original. So they bought some good stuff when they put it in, there's no doubt. And just be nice to get it upgraded and have it on a SCADA system so we can keep better track of it. And I think Sam alluded to the fact that when Al makes adjustments to the plant, it takes up 1 to 3 days possibly to get results, rather than making the adjustments on the SCADA system, and he can dial it right in and get things pretty close right away.
I know when we had that discussion, we kind of talked about, it was kind of broken down into this and this and this, and Sam kind of, at least in my mind, said, well, you really can't piecemeal it at this time because it really wouldn't be financially beneficial for the city. You can't do maybe this and this and this and wait a number of years and hope that you can get the same contractors back and get the bids back again, so it would be kind of a total package process. Any other comments in regard to the financial end of things with that?
No, it's a significant amount of money, but everything is in today's world. And again, you have to look at it as a 50-year investment. That's what the last one was, and I would assume that's what this one will be. I think Sam talked about 20 years, I believe, if I remember right when he was here, but you're probably looking at a minimum 40 to 50-year investment in that $3 million. So if you amortize that over that length of time, it makes a little more sense, I think. But again, it's going to require some rate increases. There's no question about that if you do it. And if you do the state revolving loan fund, they're going to basically come in here and tell you what your rates need to be to satisfy that loan. And you can choose to either preempt that, or you can wait until they come in at some point and they can tell you. So it's really going to be a decision that you guys will be able to make. But when and if you want to raise rates, but we all know that, my calculations, and I think they're fairly accurate. I mean, within reason, you're probably going to be looking at a 75 to 80% total increase in sewer revenue needs to pay for this plant. So however you determine to do that remains to be seen, but that's probably what it's going to require based on what our revenues are today. So.
And again, when you talk about, percentages that, if our rates were astronomical, those percentages would be astronomical, but our rates are not the lowest in the region, but
They're very, very, very reasonable compared to most communities.
Right.
And the thing to keep in mind, good, bad, or otherwise, is that the bulk of our customers or residents are, I guess customers would be residential. So when we're talking that type of percentage, you're talking about a $15 a month increase for each of our residents, if you looked at an average consumer. So that sounds, at least to some, sounds better than 80%. So,
Right.
but it really amounts to around a $15 increase per customer per month on your wastewater. So.
Sam had kind of put together a target schedule of submitting the work request. We obviously have to go through the DNR to start that process.
Yeah.
Looking at the target schedule of trying to get that facilitated starting February of this year, obviously.
And really, the first step would probably be an engagement letter with the engineering firm to engage DGR to begin this process. I guess that would be the initial step that the council would probably need to take. So,
There again, having 3 council members tonight, is that something we would want to put forth tonight, or get majority of council member, or have all 5 council members present?
that's
Obviously up to,
two weeks isn't going to make a huge difference if you wanted to wait. I mean, it's more comfortable with, especially with, in all fairness, with Rob and Jim being fairly new, it might, we can use that excuse for a little while yet. But it might
No,
be-
I'd like to see the project move forward, but I just want to make sure that everybody, we have good discussion and
Okay.
figure out whether, how we're going to pay for it and that kind of thing, too.
I'd feel more
So.
comfortable to wait.
okay. We will put this again on the next agenda for February 28th, and please keep the presentation in our packets. That's a great presentation from DGR with that.
I guess one quick question for Tom, maybe. The UV building, is that to protect equipment, or does that make servicing
That's to
more
protect the
convenient?
equipment. Right now, it's all out in the open,
Right, okay.
so it's in an open pit.
That's
We
what I
do
thought
have
then.
protection when it floods, that it has we've added some automatic controls to bring it up, because the pit will flood
Okay.
if the water's real high in the river. So other than that, it's exposed.
Right.
I'm sorry, I didn't give you an opportunity for other questions. Any other questions?
No, that was the only one thing that might come. Could be like a staged item, even though it's not a large portion of the total cost. It seemed to be one of the more independent features that we were looking at.
Thanks for your engineering mind on that. It's good to have discussion. Thank you for that. Agenda item number 8, preliminary discussion regarding a water leak adjustment policy, but since we had put this on the agenda, Gary has found further information for us, so we'll turn it right to Gary at that point.
Yeah, our ordinance has some language in it that seems to indicate that it's the customer's responsibility. Anything on the metered side of the service, the customer's responsible. So when you have a leak, the customer's responsible. Tom and I were talking, and Tom pulled this out of our utility service rules manual that we approved by resolution in '09. And if you look at it, the adjustment of the bill, it basically states that when a customer provides evidence that the utility is a leak, not resulting from negligence, it talks about how to resolve that. So there's already a resolution in place, and I think, unless Tom and Jim, you guys want to add anything to that, I mean,
I don't know, Gary, I kind of read our ordinance. It's not easy to read, but it's headlined water leaks, but then it really talks more about repairing the cause of the leak, is how I read it. Where I think that policy that we weren't aware of is a lot more specific. I do wonder what happens when you have a huge gas leak that you don't discover for 2 months. Seems like you'd blow up sometime before that. But I mean, just between Gary and I, we talked about a little bit about, at some point, maybe we should get a little more specific on maybe some requirements that people bring in a repair notice. We talk about negligence in there, but that's kind of vague. I don't really know what we'd call negligent. I know it would if you turned a faucet on and walked off, that'd be negligent. But we're thinking maybe sometime we should clarify a little bit of that.
So I think between the staff and Jim, we can probably resolve the issues without changing anything right now. But I think one of the issues that we do have is we have had recently in the not too distant past some other issues. One pretty significant one, and how far back do we go? We actually had this in place, and maybe that's something Jim can help us with, and we can talk through that. But we want to be fair.
I think with our other utilities, we are allowed to go back, cap it at 5 years.
Yeah.
But I'll have to do a little more research, and
Yeah.
because there are a few that one was significant, larger than this one that was mentioned.
And it talks about that in the adjustment of bills right above it, Tom. It talks about
Yeah.
5 years for
Yep.
both overcharges and undercharges. So I think we'll need to spend a little time on it, but I think the answer's already been found as far as resolution. It really boils down to negligence, a negligence issue, and what really, and we'll lean on Jim to determine what might or might not be negligent in those cases, and he's,
Well, I do think if I were rewriting, I probably wouldn't allow 5 years. The people ought to have to bring it to your attention within, I'd probably be looking more at 6 months, or even less, so.
I don't know what I didn't read the one that I put in your packet. I'm not sure. There was just all kinds of examples out there online, and I just threw one in there. So I don't know what that one stated actually, but
Where we've had a meter error, we have gone back quite a ways before, not over 5 years, but we'd like to err on the side of the,
That's where your meter
Customer.
is not measuring
Right.
correctly. But
or if for some reason there's a multiplier used and then they're overcharged. I think we've had that. They do get a little confusing with some of the big meters sometimes.
the particular one I put in your packet says no adjustment shall be made when the request for the adjustment is received more than 60 days after the billing date of the bill to be adjusted. So, that one's 60 days. So, and most people, they have a water leak, they're going to know, or they have a meter thing that they might not find out about. It might be different, but if they have a leak, they're going to know, and they really need to get, I think in Jim mentioned maybe having a repair ticket necessary from someone that repaired it, so that we have a confirmation that there was actually an issue that was repairable.
the meter thing seems like it's kind of cumulative. Your meter was always off, so you don't really maybe notice it, or it happens more gradually. But if you suddenly have your water usage or something, or your bill goes up double, triple, or 5 times in 1 month, that shouldn't, you should get a hold of somebody right away on that.
And trust me, Tracy will catch it.
Will
Yeah.
catch it. It goes through billing, and it's a
She-
larger bill than normal. You'll get a call.
She doesn't miss anything. She is really
She's
sharp,
excellent.
really good at what she does, so.
Well, then we shouldn't have to allow very much time.
So we'll maybe get with Tracy and Tom and Jim, and I can talk in the morning, and we can sort through some of this stuff and what we should do and how we should maybe handle some of the past issues, or whatever, so. But I think we have it taken care of because of our service policy, utility service manual, so I don't think there's any council action required unless you have some input for us or advice.
If the meter is frozen or damaged, we charge them 100% for the meter, for the equipment. But, and I think this last one it was, so that bill would have to be paid for sure.
So,
Any other thoughts from council for this particular process? Okay. Well, we're having some changes, so we need to have some changes on bank accounts. Gary wants to keep his on there just for retirement options. Just kidding, just kidding.
Oh,
Just so everybody knows
could
that.
go on vacation, we just left it as is. I
Didn't say that.
might help fund my retirement account. So. We just need a council approval to change the signatures on any accounts that I'm associated with, I guess, at this point. The banks will appreciate having that in documentation that approves who the council approves as signers on the account, so.
And would you just give us, there's a few names there that I do not know on the flex spending account, and why they would be there.
That's on a flex spending account that deals with our Section 125, and because of the way they're handled, they have to write, we turn the claims into them, and then they actually issue the checks. Correct, Pam?
Correct.
So, which is, they're out of Sioux City.
Eagle Ridge.
Eagle Ridge is what their company is called.
So
But
they're not old retired former employees that we still have names on or
no,
anything?
no, and they also handle our, we have self-insured, our deductibles on our health insurance, and they also handle that for us, so thus the need for them to be able to write checks out of their office, so.
Also, I'm just noticing with the Hawarden Area Arts Council, are they really under the city of Hawarden, or?
Technically, I'm not sure how they're titled at the bank. It's relatively new to me, but typically in the past, we've just given a donation of $500 to the Arts Council on an annual basis. For some reason, they're shown at the bank level as a bank account or a city account. So
is that something we need to look into too? Is that, I mean, when we're doing audits and those types of things, why that would be under us? Or?
I think it's a conversation we need to have because the Arts Council may be using the city as the ability to obtain tax exempt donations. So. It's something we'll have to have a discussion on, or someone will.
Okay, well, I'm just saying this
I
while
don't-
we're looking at the accounts and generality of them.
The auditor hasn't ever raised it, has he, as an issue?
I'm sorry, Jim?
Audit's never raised it.
Never, no.
I don't know. A lot of times, for things to be deductible, they need somebody to run them through, so. And they're really only accessing their own funds, right? I mean, funds that are
Yes.
given to them.
Right. And we've not had any issues with the auditors at this point. In fact, I think all of us were surprised that it was under the city heading, but we understand why. I'm sure it's because of tax deductibility for donations, so.
And then I just have a general question in regards to like the library ones that, Val's now retired, those will get cleaned up by,
We'll have to,
By the
yeah, we'll have
library.
to,
I thought we voted, and then you said you were taking it over.
yeah. So
We'll discuss it.
we just have to revise the signatures. I mean, we're handling them internally, but we still have signatures out at the bank from years past, and those will have to get cleared up with, I'm sure Lori and Pam will work together to get that done too, so. We still have Val and Terry Carlson on one of them, and Val on another one, so, those will all have to get corrected, but,
okay, so tonight we just need a motion to approve to add Mike DeBryan and remove your name on
yeah,
city.
take mine
signature.
off and add Mike's to everywhere that I'm
Okay, is there a
a
motion?
signer.
To move.
Moved by John, a second.
I'll second.
Seconded by Jen. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
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 Those opposed? Thank you, that's 3-0. We'll next move on to the 2017 Police Activity Report, please.
Well, as you can see on the activity report for 2017, looking at the traffic offenses, we had 184 go into court. Those are actual citations issued by officers. Majority of those, at 49, were for failure to have a valid driver's license. It's a statewide problem. It seems like no matter where you're at, it's always an issue. And secondly, we're speeding in OWIs, and that was 47 out of the 184. The biggest thing that I noted here were the criminal offenses. If you look at, in 2017, there was 177 of those criminal offenses, and 23% of that was drug-related. I think it was somewhere around 41 total cases. The issue I have with that is if that's going to be the number one thing that we deal with, that's taking my guys off the street. That's taking them, if in order to conduct a thorough investigation into any sort of drug relation, you're talking hours of manpower, an hour to just basically stop, deal with the person, and then after that 2 to 3 hours to compile reports, log evidence, get stuff shipped to the lab, different things that is really invaluable when our guys are in the office as opposed to on the street. But what a great opportunity to let the community know that, if we're busy doing stuff like that, we need community involvement. You see something, let us know. We have phones with voicemail, email, whatever means that you have, I ask you to please help us out. We want to get this number down. We want this to be lower on our list. Marijuana tends to be the trend here in Hawarden, which is, something that typically is seen from younger people. That was another one of the reasons why when we talked about the social hosting ordinance, it's another deterring thing to get that number back down. If you look in, it'll be the third page of my documentation, supplying alcohol to minors, we charged 7 different times, and I know 2 of them were charged inappropriately because basically all they were doing was providing a place for these people to do that. The officers didn't know that they couldn't make a charge for supplying when it was actually a social hosting issue. So creating that ordinance would help in that matter as well. If you see, the liquor violations are the second highest thing that we have next to the drugs. And those two things together create issues everywhere else. Assaults, thefts, burglaries, all of those 90% of the time are substance abuse related. Most domestic disturbances we go to is because the husband or wife has been drinking, they're upset, and things happen. Same things with the thefts. If we have somebody that's addicted to methamphetamine and they need their next fix, they may tend to go steal something from somebody, and that's why we need to work really hard. And like I said in my report here, the easiest way is swift deterrence, prosecution, and reporting, and that involves all of us. Every citizen has the ability to see something that they might think is unusual. It doesn't hurt to call and let us know. We can't be everywhere all the time. So that would be greatly appreciated. Other than that, if you look at the total number of property that was stolen, $17,440.40, and we're only able to get $3,400 of that back. Once that comes up missing, it's very hard to find it and to get it recovered. So I kind of put a fun little note there. If you just look at the statistics, I thought it was kind of funny that a typical person in Hawarden that would be charged in 2017 would be a male between the ages of 30 and 34 at 9 p.m. on a Saturday night in October. So that was just a fun little fact. But no, I think together, the community, I think will get behind everybody, help us out. We're asking for the help. We want the work. We want to be able to, make sure that everything's going great here and, keep the community a good place. So, any questions?
Surprised by October.
Surprised by October, huh?
Right.
Oh, Oktoberfest.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, too, this has a bearing on their employment and their work and everything else with the social component.
It does.
And citizens are able to see your report on our website. If they go to our meeting tonight, they can look at the agenda. This whole report is on there. So
Great.
I would wish that people would look at this so they can understand what's going on, and as you mentioned, to give the police department some assistance as far as a community member to help your department, so you're not having to process all these types of things.
Absolutely. Believe it or not, there's power in numbers, and I think the more people that get involved within the community, the stronger stance we have to rid these problems that we have. And, just turning your head doesn't work. It's that's where I have the issue is if I see something and I just walk away and not pay attention, I have that issue of what if something happens? How I couldn't live with myself if something happened. And, I just think if more people thought that way, we could really make an impact.
Right, and it could be, next time could be a family member impact.
Absolutely.
Questions for Corey? Hearing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 11. Budget discussion continued, please.
Okay. Again, getting into the budget, you guys have had your opportunity to look through it a little more in depth. I think a couple of you have asked some questions. If you look at the overall budget, I guess the most simplistic way to do this is to go to page 13, and it kind of gives you an overall view of the expenditures for the general fund. And if you look at each of those, the only one that's really there's a little increases probably in each one, very minor, but most of that is due to 2.5% wage increase and an increase in IPERs this next year. Almost all of those are up a few $1,000s here and there. The only significant increase is roadway maintenance, and that's because we've added $60,000 of seal coating in this year. That's really the only difference between the previous year and this one. That being said, again, I think the budget is, if you look at 2 years ago, last year was kind of an anomaly because of some things. So if you look at 2 years ago, we're within $30,000 of what we were 2 years ago. So, so I think we're very, very conservative in what we're doing, not overexpending, and not asking for any huge increases anywhere. We did make a couple revisions on the library because of an error on an oversight that I made, but the total was really the same, so it really didn't change the total that they were requesting. But Lori caught it, thank God, and so I made a couple changes. Otherwise, again, if you go to page, get to the right pages here. I can find it here. Again, the transfers are still one of the biggest items that I'm probably most proud of, I think, since the council and the staff have worked so hard in making changes operationally and other ways to reduce our transfers. I know when I started, our transfers out of the utilities every year to fund the general fund were $488,000 the first year I was here, which means that your rates for utilities have to be, have to compensate for $488,000 that really weren't utility related. So when we talk about doing electric projects and there we go. wastewater plant project coming up, those types of things. We can now fund those. The electric increase, we did really about $7 million of electric improvements. We did not have to do anything with rates. And the reason for that is because we've managed our transfers so well. We haven't been taking money out of those utilities to fund general fund expenditures. So we've been able to put them back in our utilities where they really should be and need to be, as we're talking about a wastewater improvement plant, program to the wastewater plant. And so we've been able to decrease those. This year we're looking at $150,000, which is lower than, quite frankly, lower than I ever thought it would be here. My initial goal when I started was hopefully someday to get that down to 250, and we passed that by last year, and we're down to 150 this year, and we really, if you look, we've got an excess of 144,902 revenues over expenditures on page 12, I believe it would be. So in essence, we could probably take transfers down to virtually nothing if we chose to do that, and still be okay. And so I think we've got a budget here. I don't know if you want, I'm not a big one to go line by line unless you guys have specifics you want to ask about, but I think those are the things that I wanted to point out, is that we've got transfers down to virtually nothing. And I think that just says a lot about council decisions that have been made and staff oversight of their departments and controlling expenditures. So we've all done a great job to put us in a great position for the future, I think, financially. We currently have our treasurer's report, we currently have about $7 million in the bank. That's it's not all restricted, or not all unrestricted. Some of it's restricted assets, but we still sit with a pretty healthy cash balances, which puts the city in a great position for the future. So, but I don't think there's any significant changes to the general fund budget this year, with the exception of adding that $60,000 for seal coating. That's really about the only significant difference you're going to find in the entire general fund portion. So, unless you've got other questions or concerns that you've noticed as you've gone through it, but. And I don't see any changes in the future. I think you guys are going to handle the finances very well, and I think bringing Mike into the picture won't change that. So he's been part of the reason that it is what it is. We've done this as a team, and so he's well aware of how hard it was to get from where we were to where we are. So. Other questions on the budget? Like I said, there's really nothing very unusual that I can point out to you. Again, it's pretty much business as usual. So, if you have specifics and you would like to come in and visit about something you see that you don't understand, you're always welcome to come in, and I'll be here for another week and a half. So, but I'm always available by phone too, and you guys, I don't want to overstep Mike either, but if Mike wants my help, he can call, and we can sure help him out. So, again, there are no surprises, nothing hidden. It's pretty black and white. So.
Well, I know when this first came out, too, I came in and talked with you a little bit, so thank you so much for explaining a lot of these things to me. So,
yep. Thank you.
Yep.
We appreciate that. I really appreciate people coming in or calling or emailing, and it's so nice to to have the concern of the council to make sure we do things right, and we never feel like we're being questioned. We always, we really feel like you need the information to make good decisions, and that's our job as staff, to make sure you get the information you need to do that.
Yeah, and you did. Thank you. So,
And again, citizens can see this exact thing on city website. so.
Sure.
Yes, it's on the website. We will have to set at the next meeting, you will have to set a date for a public hearing. That public hearing date is, on a budget, it has to be not less than 10 or more than 20 days prior to the budget hearing, the public hearing. So that will have to be in the paper by the March 1st edition of the Independent. And that'll get us in between the 10 and 20. It's really strange when you get into the budget cycle, because the timeline at 10 and 20 days really gives you about 1 week to get it published in the right week. And then also, it has to be certified at the state by March 15th. So we're going to have the public hearing on the 14th, which means, that it's going to be pretty tight. Pam will have to run this. We also have to have it at the county by the 15th. So you will have to drive it to Orange City that next day. Hopefully, no snowstorm.
Just drive.
But, so it does make
Thank
things
you.
pretty tight. And this is one of those unique years. It's always the toughest year, because our meeting falls on the 14th. Now, next year, it'll be a much easier, you'll have another week or so to get it done, but after you have the public hearing. But this particular year is the worst, because the 14th, on the first meeting is on the 14th of the month, so it makes it tough. So anyway, the next meeting you'll have on the agenda, setting a date for a public hearing. And then public hearing will be on the 14th, and you'll certify the budget at that meeting, and Pam will get it to the state the next day, and the county. So, any other questions on the general fund piece of it?
Nope, thanks again for the staff's help with putting the budget together.
No problem.
Consent agenda number 12, request from the Dollar General for an off-premise beer and wine with Sunday sales, and also Laverne Supermarket doing business as Sunshine Foods, renewal of a Class C beer permit and Class B wine permit, again with off-premise beer and wine with Sunday sales. Is there a motion for approval of the consent agenda?
So move.
Moved by John, is there a second?
one second.
Seconded by Jen. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
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 Those opposed? That passes 3-0. Just a reminder to the citizens that city offices will be closed 11:30 to 1 on Thursday, the 22nd.
Correct.
Okay. Our next regular scheduled meeting then will be Wednesday, February the 28th. Last agenda item, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Moved by John, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Jen. Thank you for your attendance. All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
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 Those opposed? Hearing none, Hayward City Council is adjourned. Thank you very much. Oh, yeah, I could have been...